Study Session 5. Agencies, Instruments and Techniques of Interstate Interaction. Introduction. As the saying will put it, no man is an island. The same applies to every state of the world. Each state of the world interacts and depends on one another in a way or the other. In this study session, we shall examine the agencies, instruments, techniques through which independent states interact with one another. Learning outcomes. When you have studied this study session, you should be able to point out the agencies of state interaction, highlight the instruments states use in interacting with one another, and identify the techniques or ways used in such interactions. Agencies of state interaction. Let us start this presentation by explaining what agent and agency mean. An agent is somebody acting on behalf of another person or body. An agency means an organization or body through which services are delivered or power exerted. Agencies of state interaction will then be regarded as those bodies through which independent states interact in the process of performing their functions. These agencies include 1. Individuals such as diplomats, ministers, heads of states and governments, etc. The Nigerian state is seen to be interacting with the Ghanaian state if our Minister of External Affairs visits Ghana on official capacity. This minister is seen as an agent of Nigeria. 2. Groups of individuals, such as cultural or dancing troupes or soccer teams. Business companies are at times subtly used by states to promote state goals, e.g., the International Telegraph and Telecommunication (ITT) business company in Chile helped the American Central Intelligence Agency (CIA) to overthrow the socialist government of President Allende. Business companies can also feature in contract negotiations between states. 3. Intelligence organizations such as the CIA, Israeli Mossad, or Soviet Union KGB are also agencies of state interaction, but they work secretly. The CIA can supply the State of Israel or South Africa vital information on international affairs. 4. International organizations such as the United Nations Organization, Organization of African Unity, Economic Community of West African States, among others, serve as fora or platforms for state interaction. 5. Military units are also agents of the state. They can attack another state on behalf of their home state or defend their home state against external attacks. 6. International law also regulates state behavior and guides international transactions. Tip: agencies of state interaction will then be regarded as those bodies through which independent states interact in the process of performing their functions. Instruments of state interaction. By instruments here, we mean those devices or tools by which states interact. Even though agents are part of these instruments, the instruments of relevance here are the economic, political, cultural, psychological, and military ones. We now present them to you one after the other. Economic instruments. There are two major economic instruments here. One is international trade, and the second is foreign economic aid. International trade has many elements that states can manipulate to favor, reward, or punish other states, such as common market, tariffs, quota, sabotage of exports or imports, currency manipulation, exclusion from trading arrangements, boycott of goods produced, blockade, embargo, etc. Example: Nigeria can blockade South Africa by sea so that the apartheid country's exports and imports cannot move by sea if Nigeria has adequate military power. Foreign economic aid can be given by a state to another state to promote economic development or for other reasons. Such aid includes grants, loans, foods, technical advice, and so on. We will discuss more about foreign aid later. Political instrument. This is mainly diplomacy. What is diplomacy, you may ask? Ajibola defines diplomacy as interactions among states which involve exchange of men for men who act on behalf of their mother states in matters peculiar to their national interests. This involves use of embassies coordinated by the Foreign or External Affairs Ministry. Sociocultural instrument. This involves sports, ideas, games, technology, and dancing groups or cultural troupes. States can boycott sporting arenas to register their protest over states' actions or policy. Example: African states boycott any international sporting activity involving apartheid South Africa as a way of pressurizing South Africa to dismantle her apartheid system. Also, states try to convert citizens of other states through religious bodies, youth movements, friendship associations, and clubs. Psychological instruments. This is mainly propaganda. Propaganda can be seen in a sense as the process of influencing people's views, feelings, emotions, and behavior through the manipulation of information and figures. Most of the time, the information given is false or half-truth. Featuring also name-calling, brainwashing, cover-ups, and news blackouts. Military instruments. This involves espionage, that is, spy operations, sabotage of transport and communication through laying of mines on land and sea, intervention such as United States invasion of Grenada or Soviet invasion of Afghanistan, military aid, sales of arms, threats of war and war itself. Techniques of state interaction. Techniques here refer to the ways in which the states use the instruments discussed above in the pursuit of their national goals. These techniques include A. Peaceful negotiations meant to exchange views, enhance understanding over trade, aid, and a number of other issues. Negotiations are usually done by diplomats and ministers, though other authorities and bodies can come in where necessary. B. Agreements or treaties are entered into to promote trade, end wars, or effect military aid. Such treaties are usually deposited with the UNO, and each signatory is bound to follow the letters of the agreement. C. Threat or use of force can be done if a state feels strongly about the policies or activities of another state. E.g., the USA once threatened to use force against Libya if the latter kept on supporting terrorist organizations. D. Actual use of force or war can take place if warning threats are ignored, just as the United States bullied Libya by invading and bombarding Libyan territory in 1986. Foreign aid. Foreign aid is the transfer of money, goods, or technical advice or assistance from a donor to a recipient. There are many types of foreign aid, such as 1. Economic aid, including grants, which are gifts of money or resources for projects that don't yield financial feedbacks. Technical aid and cooperation, involving the release of experts to evaluate programs and give expert advice in agriculture, investment, loans, that is, intergovernmental or government bank loans, and so on. 2. Sociocultural aid, such as food items and drugs, given in time of famine or natural disaster. Money can also be given for cultural festivals. 3. Military aid, which includes training of the recipient state's soldiers free in the donor country, provision of military equipment, and grants to release domestic resources that would have been devoted to military expenditures. Sources of foreign aid are diversified, but can be grouped into two main broad categories: bilateral sources, that is, between two states, and multilateral sources, that is, between a state and many others, but operating through one organized body, such as the United Nations Organization and the African Development Bank. Much of foreign aid that go to poor nations follow the bilateral approach because the donors often want to extort something useful from the recipients. This brings us to the uses of aid. Foreign aid can be used by a donor to promote its own foreign policy and secure its national goals in these ways. 1. A donor can give aid to another state to influence the recipient into towing the donor's line of action or policy. E.g., President Carter of the USA gave aid mainly to the states respecting human rights. 2. A donor can give aid to a recipient to stop the latter from joining its, that is, the donor's opponents. The USA prepared the Marshall Plan in 1945 to ensure that the West European states don't join the socialist bloc of the USSR. 3. Aid can also be used to influence nations to open up their economies for the donors' business companies, and thus expand particular ideologies in the international system. E.g., much of the foreign economic aid coming to Africa is from Western Europe and is meant partially to keep Africa in the capitalist orbit. Eugene Black, a former president of the World Bank, once said about the aid and the USA that aid is of great benefit to the USA in 3 ways. A. Aid encourages the growth of overseas markets for American goods. B. Aid allows the growth of nations under the free market enterprise, that is, capitalist system, thereby creating boom for African firms. C. Aid stimulates the development of overseas territories for American firms. These of course show that the so-called aids the poor nations get are aid for the donor and not for the recipient. Foreign aid, the way it is given by the Europeans, has negative effects on the growth of Africa's economy because it weakens instead of strengthening Africa. Not only this, our leaders have not been able to judiciously use the loans and grants we have received, hence the crushing debt burden facing African states today. Africans should work hard for their own growth, security, and development, and should stop depending on others, that is the Europeans, for anything. Study session summary. In this study session, you learned how independent states of the world interact through agencies, including individuals, business companies, and international organizations. In their processes of interactions, these states use economic instruments as trade and aid, political instruments as diplomacy, cultural instruments as sports, psychological instruments such as propaganda, and military instruments as war. The techniques of states' interaction can be negotiations, treaties, threats of war, or war. End of study session 5. Thanks for listening.